On the 12th of November in 2003, in the 11th episode of the 7th season of South Park, Kyle celebrates his birthday and he's allowed to bring 3 friends to the party at a Mexican restaurant down in South Park. I'm sure to the entire world's surprise, he did not invite Cartman, but instead he invited Stan, Kenny, and Butters. But this wasn't just an ordinary Mexican restaurant. It was a magical wonderland filled with sopapillas, puppet shows, and extravagant waterfalls with cliff divers. And not being invited led Cartman to nearly kill Butters to take his place at the party, trap him in a bunker for over a week, and most surprising of all, it actually led him to be a kind friend to Kyle.
I have never been a dick to you.
Oh, please. All you ever do is call me names and rip on me for being Jewish.
Kyle, when have I ever ripped on you for being a Jew? Oh yeah, well you're a Jew.
You're a Jew.
Shut your goddamn ass.
Off, Cartman!
Okay, except maybe for that one time.
But what if I told you guys that this entire story wasn't just a part of a fictional cartoon, but it was actually a very real restaurant that played a major role in the childhoods of the creators of this cartoon, Matt Stone and Trey Parker. But not even a feature in South Park could save this restaurant. It went bankrupt, and then the creators of South Park nearly went bankrupt to try and save it. So before we dive into what's possibly the greatest episode of South Park of all time, let's understand what Casa Bonita is and why it was so important to include it in one of South Park's greatest episodes. Before we get started, if you don't believe me that this is one of the best South Park episodes, take it from the creators themselves, who said that this was actually one of their favorite episodes to create and rewatch.
This is definitely among my top 10 favorite episodes of all time. This was another very last-minute idea that sort of all came together. All just based on this place we used to go as kids in Denver, Colorado, called Casa Bonita.
Which, by the way, let me just say off the bat that Casa Bonita let us use their name and their restaurant in this episode, which makes them even cooler than they already are. Because most places won't allow their name or likeness to be used in South Park.
Matt Stone and Trey Parker knew they had to bring Casa Bonita into the South Park universe because the restaurant played a big role in their childhoods. They describe it as the Mexican version of Disneyland, and even though it was placed in the middle of a boring strip mall, what laid inside that restaurant played a major impact on their childhood memories.
Basically, if you grew up within a few hundred miles of Casa Bonita, you knew about it because you wanted to go.
It's like one of those places where, being a kid, it was like you were in Disney World version of Mexico. Huge, awesome, amazing place with everything. And then, of course, we all went back like in college, and it's just this kind of crappy little place in a strip mall.
Yeah, it's not as cool when you go back to
really
older.
definitely.
But I still think kids probably still love it.
Oh, yeah, no, and I'll take my kids right there as soon as I have some someday. I'll be definitely taking them to Casa Bonita. There was just nothing better. But I remember
cliff
this...
divers and a gorilla.
So before Casa Bonita became associated with South Park, it was already one of the strangest restaurants ever created. The first Casa Bonita opened in 1968 in Oklahoma City by a man named Bill Waugh. At the time, Mexican food was still relatively novel in Oklahoma, and Waugh's initial concept for the restaurant was much simpler than what it became. It started off as an inexpensive way to have some all-you-can-eat Mexican food. And it's funny because decades later, the actual quality of the food at the restaurant would lead to its downfall. I mean, even with Matt Stone and Trey Parker reopening the restaurant, it's still getting some one-star reviews as recent as 2 months ago, with people saying they're selling an entertainment experience, so the food quality doesn't matter to them. And an entertainment experience it was. See, the creator of the restaurant, Bill Waugh, he had actually studied art, and one of his biggest creative influences was Walt Disney, particularly attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean. So when Matt Stone and Trey Parker say that they remember it as kids as like a Mexican version of Disneyland, it's not that far off. Bill Waugh's goal initially was to combine Mexican food with the immersive experience of a theme park. And that sounds like a pretty cool idea until you see what the execution eventually became. Casa Bonita expanded into Little Rock in 1969 and Tulsa in 1971. And with each new location, Casa Bonita's creator seemed increasingly determined to answer the following question: how much unnecessary crap can we possibly fit inside a Mexican restaurant? The first location had caves, fountains, tropical gardens, mariachi bands, a waterfall, a puppet theater, a magic theater, an arcade, a carousel, and a gift shop. It's almost like you were meant to forget that the main purpose of going into this place was to order some enchiladas. But Bill Waugh's masterpiece truly came in 1974 when Casa Bonita opened its Colorado location, which is where Trey Parker was born and of course where South Park is based in. The thing is, Casa Bonita wasn't sitting beside Cinderella's castle in Disney World. It was inside a suburban shopping center. Sticking out of that shopping center was an enormous pink Spanish-style tower more than 80 feet tall, topped with a gold dome. And somehow the inside was significantly more ridiculous. The Colorado Casa Bonita occupied roughly 52,000 square feet. There was enough room in the restaurant to serve over 1,000 people. Like, to put it into perspective, you guys, this restaurant was bigger than more than 25 average-sized American homes. It was almost the size of one full American football field. And the experience was essentially this. You'd grab your food, cafeteria style, and then you'd disappear into this enormous maze of themed dining rooms. Caves, haunted tunnels, cliff divers, arcades, puppet shows, magic shows, mariachi bands, wandering around while you ate, a 30-foot cliff with real divers, a character named Black Bart who would emerge from his cave and get into staged gunfights, some of the employees even dressed up as gorillas. So think about just like wanting to go out to eat for some Mexican food and ending up in a strip mall with a dining experience more chaotic than an episode of South Park. And while that might have been amazing for kids like Matt Stone and Trey Parker, like I mentioned before, the food became secondary. The experience was the priority. And because of that, by the 90s and 2000s, the Casa Bonita empire slowly started disappearing. The original Oklahoma City location closed in 93, Little Rock eventually disappeared, Tulsa struggled through closures, reopenings, and ownership problems before finally shutting down in 2011, and one by one, Casa Bonita crumbled, except for Colorado. The absurd Pink Palace in a Lakewood shopping center became the last surviving Casa Bonita, and by that point, it had transcended being a restaurant. It was basically a preserved palace of somebody's childhood. And amongst the thousands of Colorado kids who grew up completely obsessed with this bizarre place were, of course, two guys named Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And eventually, that Casa Bonita crave would become very, very costly. It all started with the Casa Bonita South Park episode, but like many genius South Park episodes, the concept derived from a really simple and stupid idea. See, initially Matt Stone and Trey Parker just knew that they wanted to make a South Park episode where Cartman tries to hide Butters in a bomb shelter.
I just had the idea of having Cartman want to fool Butters, and we had this idea for a long time where it was like, I wanted Cartman to do the thing with the telescope where he makes Butters think an asteroid is coming towards Earth, and he just holds up the little rock and it gets him down into a bomb shelter. And I sat there going, but we just got to figure out why would he want Butters down in a bomb shelter. And then it was on a Thursday as usual, and we're like, well, what if there's a birthday party and Cartman gets to go if Butters can't go and all that, and it all sort of came from that.
As you'll see shortly, this random idea obviously snowballed into the iconic Casa Bonita episode. But once Matt and Trey knew that they wanted to include the restaurant in their show, unlike when they turned Tom Cruise into a fudge packer or Kanye West into a gay fish, they felt it was important to portray Casa Bonita as accurately as possible to the real-world restaurant. They didn't invent anything when they had all the boys go to Casa Bonita in that South Park episode.
We didn't make anything up here. Basically, everything that Cartman says they have, that's what they have, and it's really modeled after what it looks like. A lot of the animators and Eric Butters, the animation director here, had gone to Casa Bonita many times for his birthday as well.
What's funny is this episode isn't necessarily about Casa Bonita itself, but it's more of a demonstration of the lengths Cartman will go to when he wants something badly enough. Like I said before, the episode begins when Kyle announces that his mom is taking him and 3 friends to Casa Bonita for his birthday. Cartman immediately assumes he's going because why wouldn't he? He loves Casa Bonita. Casa Bonita is the greatest place on earth. And yeah, Kyle kind of sucks, but he's with Kyle every day. Who the hell else is Kyle gonna invite? Well, Kyle flips the script. He makes it very obvious. Him and Cartman are not friends. Cartman's constantly treating him like crap, insulting him. Why would anyone want someone like that at their birthday? He's gonna bring Butters instead.
Dude, I wonder where Kyle is. Maybe he caught a disease and died. That'd be so awesome. Dude, that's not funny. You shouldn't joke about that. Who's joking?
And of course, Cartman's devastated, but his instinct isn't, maybe Kyle has a point, maybe I should treat my friends better. Instead, it's, how do I convince Kyle that I'm actually a nice guy? The problem is Cartman's smart enough to understand that being nice can get you things. he just doesn't understand what being genuinely nice actually is. At one point, he goes to the nicest kid in school, Jimmy, for some lessons on how to be nice. Jimmy tries to teach Cartman how to tell a funny joke, because if you're a funny guy, surely your friends are going to think you're nice. And while Cartman didn't steal Jimmy's joke this time like he did with the Kanye Fish Chicks one, he ends up seeing Kyle walk through the hallway as he's talking to Jimmy and starts beating the crap out of this crippled kid, pretending like he was defending Kyle against an insulting joke that Jimmy had made about him.
Well, Eric, part of being nice is just making people smile and laugh. The best way to do that is by telling a fantastic joke or a humorous anecdote. Take that, Jimmy, and that! And don't you ever talk bad about Kyle again! Kyle is my friend! And if you say you had sex with his mom one more time, I'm gonna really let you have it. You hear me? Oh, Kyle, hey.
You really think that beating up a handicapped kid is being nice?
The worst part is that's not even the most delusional thing that Cartman did to try and be nice to Kyle. At one point, the attempts to be nice become so lazy that Cartman simply puts on a nice sweater, thinking that dressing nice equates to actually being nice.
Hi, Kyle.
That isn't it, Cartman.
What isn't it?
That's not being nice. That's just putting on a nice sweater.
I don't understand the difference.
I know you don't.
But the turning point in this episode, and one of the most powerful scenes in my opinion in the entirety of South Park, is when Cartman finally understands that being nice is a lot simpler than the methods he was trying to go through. Now, whether he was being genuine here or not, that's up for your interpretation, but he essentially explains to Kyle like he's aware that he's always ripping on him, that he's not the kindest friend, but this was all part of their dynamic. They had been through a lot together, and to Cartman their shared history had meant something. And he claims, this is likely just Cartman putting on a facade, but he says that regardless of if he's left out of the Casa Bonita birthday party, he still hopes that he can stick around and hang out with Kyle.
So, fine, Kyle, but honestly, I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter at all to me. I know we argue all the time, and I give you tons of crap, but we've also been through a lot together, and maybe that alone doesn't make us friends, but it makes us something. So, whatever, just, I hope things can be cool.
Spicy.
Now Kyle, being a genuinely nice person, is touched by Cartman's words and tells him that if Butters, for whatever reason, can't show up to Casa Bonita, Cartman can take his place. And this sets a light bulb off in Cartman's head.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you all along. I still have to take Butters, but I hope things can be cool too.
Good.
And hey, if for some reason Butters can't go to Casa Bonita, you can take his place.
Sweet, whatever. Bingo.
Now, a normal 9-year-old might hear this and, hope that Butters gets sick, but Cartman hears it and begins planning a kidnapping. The solution is to convince Butters that scientists have discovered a gigantic meteor heading directly towards Earth. And because his victim is Butters, a child who the boys have previously convinced to fake his own death, or that Cartman convinced he had a human-sized robot companion long before the days of ChatGPT, Butters was of course naive enough to immediately believe the whole meteor catastrophe thing. So, just like the initial idea that Matt and Trey had for making this episode about Cartman hiding Butters in a bomb shelter, that's where that segment comes into play. Cartman brings Butters to an old bomb shelter and explains that he needs to hide underground until the disaster passes. Butters thinks Cartman is a hero saving him from the Earth's destruction. All the while, Cartman is dreaming of sopapillas and cliff divers. So Butters disappears into the shelter, his parents start panicking, the entire town starts searching for him, and by the time Saturday rolls around for Casa Bonita night, Cartman conveniently shows up to Kyle's house, pretending like he doesn't know where Butters is or that he's even missing, pretending that he doesn't expect to go with the boys to Casa Bonita, but instead, he shows up at Kyle's door with a nice big birthday gift for his quote-unquote friend.
Happy birthday, Kyle. I just wanted to stop by and give you your present.
Oh, thanks, dude.
Hope you have a good one. See you later.
Oh, wait, Cartman.
Yes?
Butters didn't show. You want to go to Casa Bonita with us?
This is when all the boys find out Butters is missing, and Kyle makes the completely reasonable decision that he doesn't feel comfortable celebrating his birthday while his friend is possibly dead. So the Casa Bonita visit gets postponed for a week, and this creates a whole new problem.
We can postpone Casa Bonita until next Saturday.
Next Saturday? I'll never be able to keep Butters down in the depths of my heart for that long. I sure hope he turns up before then.
Cartman now has to keep Butters kidnapped for 7 more days. And of course he's ready to do that. He returns to the shelter and lets Butters know that the meteor hit everyone's dead, South Park's been destroyed, the outside world is covered in radiation, and radioactive cannibals are apparently roaming the wasteland. Things start getting even worse when the search party announces that they're going to start checking abandoned bomb shelters to see if Butters is there, so Cartman's got to relocate his little hostage. He puts a cardboard box over Butters' head so that he can't see South Park is somehow looking suspiciously undestroyed. He brings Butters to an abandoned gas station and convinces him that he's walking through the radioactive remains of civilization. Then Cartman pretends to fight off a cannibal. He acts like he's been bitten by the cannibal, and as if cannibals are like vampires where if you get bitten by one you somehow turn into a cannibal yourself. His quote-unquote solution to save Butters is to now lock him inside of an abandoned refrigerator.
I've got to fight them off! Stay away from Butters, he's humanity's last hope! He bit me! He bit off my hand! Oh God, he's eating my hand like a piece of chicken! Can you hear the bones crack?
That fridge immediately gets picked up by a garbage truck and dumped at a local landfill. And that actually works in Cartman's favor because by the time Butters emerges from the fridge and looks around, all he sees is an enormous pile of garbage. And he concludes that this must be what's left of Earth. We'll get back to that shortly, because somehow all of this ended up fitting right into Cartman's plan. A full week has passed and he's finally on his way to Casa Bonita with Kyle, Stan, and Kenny. And if you were questioning whether Cartman was genuine in what he said to Kyle earlier in this episode, that regardless of what they've been through, he still really does consider Kyle his friend, all that gets tossed out the car window while they're driving down to Casa Bonita, and Cartman can barely contain his excitement as he's suggesting to the boys where they should start off first in Casa Bonita. Stan chimes in to say, shouldn't we let Kyle decide? I mean, it is his birthday after all, and Cartman says, what? Nah, F Kyle.
Dude, it's Kyle's birthday. We should do whatever he wants to do. What? Kyle. Haha. Just kidding. Birthday joke. Of course we do whatever Kyle wants. Happy birthday, Kyle.
But finally, they make it. Casa Bonita, the most magical Mexican restaurant on Earth. But suddenly, Kyle's mom gets a phone call. They found Butters. After attempting to rebuild civilization in a garbage dump, one of the employees there had actually encountered Butters and recognized that he was a missing child. Immediately, whoever's on the phone with Kyle's mom wants to know if she's with Cartman. And when Cartman hears that, he runs into the restaurant and tries to do a speed run of the most full-fledged Casa Bonita experience as humanly possible while the cops chase him. And it's here where Matt and Trey give their viewers a tour of the legendary restaurant that defined their childhood. Cartman tears through the establishment trying to experience every attraction before he's caught by the police. He watches the cliff divers, he runs through Black Bart's cave, he gets his picture taken, watches the performers, he grabs some food, he gets his sopapillas, and then finally with the cops right behind him, Cartman eventually reaches the waterfall and launches himself off the cliff. For a few glorious seconds, Cartman gets everything he ever wanted, and the police finally drag him away. And while they ask him if it was worth kidnapping his friend, scaring the entire town for over a week, and landing himself a week in juvenile hall, Cartman says it was totally worth it. All for a few minutes inside Casa Bonita. Now, unlike most of South Park's disparaging and satirical mentions of pop culture figures, moments, or in this case, establishments, having an entire South Park episode dedicated to this restaurant actually did a lot more good for the business than harm. The general manager had went on to say that the episode actually boosted foot traffic within the establishment.
South Park hurt or helped drive business?
South Park definitely helped business.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, when it re-airs, we see a ton of business every time.
And think about the target customer base for a place like Casa Bonita, right? It was likely a lot of parents in their 40s and 50s who were bringing their children for a fun dinner experience. But after the episode aired, the general manager actually said in 2014 that South Park helped not only boost the business, but it also specifically brought in a lot more young adults into the restaurant. Casa Bonita was suddenly quote-unquote cool with the 18 to 25-year-old demographic. So the Colorado Casa Bonita remained open throughout the rest of the 2000s and the 2010s. But by March of 2020, something happened that was almost prophetic, because in the South Park episode, Cartman has to convince Butters that the world literally collapsed in order to get himself into Casa Bonita. But by March 2020, the world literally did collapse. And that meant no one could ever step foot into Casa Bonita again. COVID-19 hit, Colorado suspended its in-person dining, and Casa Bonita temporarily shut its doors.
Earlier this month, the restaurant's parent company filed for bankruptcy. Court documents show Casa Bonita faces $4.4 million in debt.
At the time, nobody knew that this quote-unquote temporary shutdown was about to put Casa Bonita in such serious financial trouble that the two guys who had spent years advertising the place for free would eventually have to step in and save it. When restaurants in Colorado were eventually allowed to reopen after the pandemic, Casa Bonita never really came back. Its dining room remained closed, the old ownership was struggling financially, and by April 2021, the owner, Summit Family Restaurants, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. So by that summer, Matt and Trey realized that there was a legitimate possibility that the place they had spent their childhoods visiting and then immortalizing on South Park could either disappear or end up in their hands. And when Trey publicly announced that he was trying to buy it with Matt, his biggest priority was not saving the cliff divers, it was saving the food. Just like in their South Park episode, they wanted to preserve all the original details of Casa Bonita that made it amazing, but they wanted to fix the one thing that made it suck. But there was one slight problem. They weren't the only people trying to save Casa Bonita. And the group that was trying to save it literally seems like a cast of characters that came straight out of a South Park episode. I mean, the group was literally called Save Casa Bonita. It was led by a longtime superfan of the restaurant, Andrew Novick, who had celebrated his 300th visit to the fine establishment. And keep in mind, this guy wasn't a kid or nothing. He was like a 30-year-old man.
Group called Save Casa Bonita, run by this man.
I don't want to see it become a South Park joke or a South Park fun land. Casa Bonita doesn't need South Park.
Who is the final boss for Matt and Trey, as he admits to having been to Casa Bonita 300 times.
Crazy, I've been coming since 1974. It's a feast, it's a festival, it's a feastival. Got the fajita upgrade.
I just had my 300th visit to Casa Bonita in 2019. So I put together a group of restaurateurs, creatives, advocates, all to help try to save Casa Bonita.
Who filed an objection against Parker and Stone's sale agreement, as they put an offer down first.
So really it was the landlord's preferred buyer that got the sale. And so we find that that's highly objectionable.
Giving a higher sum of $3.5 million, resulting in it being a decision that would be decided in court on who would be the new owners of Casa Bonita. Objection to the sale was later withdrawn for the group Save Casa Bonita. Casa Bonita's current owner, Summit Family Restaurants Inc., submitted a reply asking the court to overrule Save Casa Bonita's objection and approve the sale to Parker and Stone, saying that $3.1 million is a fair price.
They coerced the ownership into selling to their group. It's an unfair practice.
What's interesting about this is Save Casa Bonita had provided no proof of funds, which makes sense if you look at their fundraising page, which was quite far off the money they claim to have.
But anyways, after a long and ridiculous bidding war, Matt and Trey finally emerged victorious and purchased Casa Bonita for $3.1 million in November of 2021. But what they paid to actually acquire Casa Bonita, well, that turned out to be the cheap part, because once they got inside and started figuring out what it would actually take to reopen this place, they realized that they hadn't just bought a restaurant, they bought a frickin' 52,000 square foot rat-infested problem. It wasn't just rats, it was rotten floors, rotten walls and ceilings, outdated electrical systems, major plumbing problems throughout the building. They have a whole documentary showcasing the process of rebuilding their childhood Mexican wonderland called Casa Bonita Mi Amor. And while their original renovation budget was somewhere around $8 million, it ultimately ended up costing them over $40 million. And the reason why goes back to the same intention that Matt and Trey had 23 years earlier when they wrote the Casa Bonita South Park episode, which is that they did not want to deviate a single detail from the original essence of the restaurant. And by the time they bought the frickin' thing, they didn't want to bulldoze Casa Bonita and build some modern restaurant in its place. Their philosophy was change nothing and improve everything. The cliff divers stayed, Black Bart's cave stayed, the mariachis were there, the arcade was there. The entire atmosphere remained the same. So of course, preserving the magic without tearing the whole thing down, but getting rid of the rats and fixing all the actual infrastructure problems was a very costly and time-inducing job. They also hired the acclaimed Denver chef Dana Rodriguez to completely overhaul the kitchen and the menu. Dana's goal was to make the food dramatically better while keeping the spirit of the original establishment. And it's kind of funny that a restaurant with cliff divers, gorillas as employees, mariachi bands, and a lot more, the most ambitious goal in that restaurant's history was to improve the quality of the food. But after almost 2 years of construction, the revived Casa Bonita began reopening in 2023. And the demand was absolutely ridiculous. Initially, you can only get into the new Casa Bonita with an invite, and for more than a year, people essentially had to enter a lottery and hoped that they received an invitation. By September of 2024, Casa Bonita finally opened normal reservations to everybody, and within moments of the reservation system going live, roughly 50,000 people were waiting in the virtual queue. So after Matt and Trey spent tens of millions of dollars wondering whether they had made one of the dumbest investments of their lives, there were still dozens of thousands of people willing to fly across the country to try these mediocre sopapillas. By May of 2026, Matt and Trey had actually said that the restaurant averages around 12,000 customers every single week. And even more surprisingly, after dumping over $40 million into the renovation, Trey had said that Casa Bonita was now almost breaking even. But that doesn't mean they're even close to making a single penny off of the restaurant. They said that maybe they'd get their money back by like 2040. But the beautiful part is that to this day, Casa Bonita still operates with the same spirit that it had 20 plus years ago when Matt and Trey fell in love with the establishment as kids. You walk in and eat your mediocre Mexican cafeteria food, you watch the cliff divers, you wander through the caves, you see the live performers, and you spend hours exploring the building. There's even a couple South Park references incorporated into the revived restaurant, with a whole dedicated table to Cartman. And now when you look back at that 2003 episode, there's a pretty funny irony there. Cartman was willing to destroy an entire town just to experience Casa Bonita to himself for a few minutes. 20 plus years later, South Park's creators nearly destroyed themselves financially after the entire world nearly got destroyed, just to make sure that the rest of the world would be able to experience Casa Bonita. So just like when the police asked Cartman if terrorizing his community and landing himself a week in juvenile detention was worth the experience of the magical Casa Bonita, I'm sure if you now ask Matt and Trey if burning almost $50 million and spending multiple years of their lives rebuilding an old crusty restaurant was worth it to once again experience the magical Casa Bonita, just like Cartman, they would also say yes. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.